Welcome to Human Design Center. I am glad that we share a common interest in human design, the science of differentiation, the art of living your life according to your unique design and genetic matrix that sustains it. Today, you are going to learn or recap, as the case may be, about Hexagram 2, the receptive, the direction of the self, receptivity as the primal base through which any response is determined, the root of action. Hexagram 2 is part of second trimester of DUBHE, where we accomplish our purpose through physical form civilization. Gate 2 corresponds to goddess MAIA, the feminine archetype of the mother of all gods, being the one that gave birth to Hermes, the messenger of the Olympic gods. Gate 2 flows within the individual knowing circuit, which is about present, hearing, acoustic, melancholy, empowering myself and empowering others. Keyword of the individual circuit: empowerment. The opposite gate is number 1, the creative, self-expression. Zodiac sign: Taurus, relevant organ, stern, aminoacid, phenylalanine. Center: G, magnetic monopole, regarding identity, direction, love. Tarot card associated: Ace of Swords. The harmonic gate is number 14, possession in great measure, power skills, being part of the generated channel. 14-2, the beat, keeper of the keys. Gate 2 in second trimester, in MAIA, forms the channel with Gate 14 located in the fourth trimester of Sirius mutation spirit, connecting to Hades archetype. This way, amino acid phenylalanine associated with Gate 2 communicates with amino acid lysine of Gate 14. It is relevant for the value and functioning of this gate to observe that amino acid phenylalanine is the same as for the Gate 8, under the castle of the same goddess MAIA. It is useful to have in mind that these two gates share the same amino acid, both placed within the same energy of MAIA. Phenylalanine is an essential amino acid, meaning it should be brought into the body from your diet, because the body cannot make it. Phenylalanine is a precursor for the biosynthesis of tyrosine, this one being formed on the basis of phenylalanine that we take from our food. It's an aspect to ponder. When you analyze the gates corresponding to tyrosine, meaning 31 and 62, do not forget that there is a chain connection with way of functioning of the gates 2 and 8 versus 31 and 62. It will give you a meaningful reading of these gates. If a person have high levels of phenylalanine, then for sure there is a decreased level of tyrosine, therefore a decreased level of neurotransmitters, which are involved in the cognitive functions of our body. Phenylalanine is naturally present in high-protein foods, such as meat, fish, eggs, dairy products, cereals, beans, nuts, and tofu. It is also abundantly present in some non-protein foods, such as carbonated drinks and foods containing artificial sweeteners, aspartame. So since we've located the gate on the mandala and on the body graph, and we have a general summary of the essential characteristics of Gate 2, now let's dive into the second gate message and energy. We have to look at the Sphinx, at the nature of the G center, at the concept of self. Keep in mind about the nature of the G center that this is where the magnetic monopole is. The monopole has two basic functions, one of which is to hold us together in the illusion of our separateness, what we call love. The other aspect of the G center is the aspect that hooks us up to our geometry. It moves us along in our trajectory in space. This is the Sphinx, and this is the nature of direction in life. One of the things to keep in mind about the Sphinx is that it has this configuration with all gates in the G center of the second gate below and the 3 other gates pointing up to the throat. All of those 3 gates are roll gates. Only one gate in the Sphinx gives direction, this second gate. It is the only one. The nature of direction for humanity is an evolutionary direction which is rooted in mutation. No matter how logic establishes the validity of a pattern, that pattern can always be destroyed by mutation, because mutation is the way of life. The fact is that the second gate is the gate that transforms mutation into direction. The driver is in the second gate, but the perspectives vary, since the other three gates represent perspectives of the driver. So, you have the driver who, while he is driving along, is staring intensely out of the front window and is literally looking into the future. This is the logic driver in the seventh gate, and that is his perspective out of the seventh gate. Then you have the driver who, while the car is driving along, is always looking in the rear view mirror. He always has to see what is behind him and where he is coming from. This is abstract perspective. This is the 13th gate looking backwards out of the rear view mirror. Then there is the perspective in which, while the car is driving along the road, the driver is looking at his own hands on the dashboard. This is the driver, relatively speaking, in the now, and it is the perspective that comes out of the first gate. Remember, it is the same car driving on same road in the same direction. This is so important to understand. The direction is not altered by the perspective. The perspective is simply on the movement. So, if you talk about direction, when you look for direction in somebody's chart, do not confuse direction with the roll gates of the Sphinx. These are perspectives. The direction is always coming out of the second gate, the driver. Above the lines, there is a very important comment here. In the receptive, we are dealing with the most yin of all hexagrams, receptivity as the primal base through which any response is determined, the root of action. Everything about what we are going to do as a totality and where we are going to move to in this life as a totality is rooted in this gate, the receptive. This is a primal base. Out of this, all direction comes. Out of this, all evolutionary action comes. Keep in mind the fact that the driver always needs access to other things. We are not talking about how this comes out in somebody's design. We are talking about the nature of this gate. The driver can end up being starved for fuel, not having the 14th. The nature of this gate is that this is where direction, origin is. This is the core of that. It is truly the driver. Walking through the 6 lines of the gate 2, it's a process that will bring clarity to you in relation to nuances of the content and expression of the second gate. At the end, we will touch upon the crosses of incarnation, where gate 2 plays its role and become part of the purpose. Let's see. Gate 2, line 1. Intuition. The first line always gives you the basis. It is called intuition here. It says, as an overview, sensitivity to disharmony and atrophy. This is very important. Venus, exalted. The importance of aesthetics, whether inborn or acquired. What is direction? One of the things that is pleasant about human design is that it's pretty. It has to do with aesthetics. It sounds poetic, but it is true that our direction is about trying to find the most beautiful way. It really is our direction. We are trying to find a way to avoid ugliness and disharmony, so the importance of aesthetics, whether inborn or acquired. Mars in detriment. The assertion of ego in spite of wisdom. This being a first line, it tries to figure out what the direction is. What is the direction, and how does that direction work? In the White Book, higher knowing through aesthetics. The thing to recognize about our direction is that what we are trying to find, what everybody is looking for, what people call paradise, happiness, bliss, is a direction that brings us pleasure and that brings us beauty and harmony in this life. It is not such a bad thing to know that humanity, at its foundation in terms of the direction it is moving towards, is looking for beauty and harmony. It does not mean that it is going to get it. However, it is a very nice place to go. The other thing is that ego, willpower, is not what direction is all about. It is not the ego that dictates whether you go this way or that way. Direction is not something we control. Direction is a mutative force. The detriment here is the urge for action that will ignore the wisdom of the higher self. The wisdom of the higher self says the direction is already there. Do not impose willpower on this. People who have the first line in detriment will try many times in their life to alter direction by willpower, only to discover that it is disastrous for them. Our direction is towards beauty and harmony. This is the Sphinx after all, and part of the great mystery of what the Sphinx is. It is not bad. Let's keep working on it. You will notice that in 3 of the 6 lines, the word ego is mentioned. In the other 3 lines, where ego is not mentioned, it is implied. The great dilemma of the self is that ego is a motor, and it always claims direction in this gate. The ego wants to be able to say, I am in charge of the direction, rather than seeing that the driver simply drives and the passenger sits in the back seat. Whenever you see the ego applied here, understand that this is the basic conflict that always exists between G-center gates and heart gates. The ego wants to make claims on the self. Gate 2, line 2, genius. The second line is genius. It is a very special line when you think about what second lines are. The light in the room where people look in from the outside. Everybody looks at the 2.2 and says they know where they are going. The person that has that second line, they do not know that they know where they are going. They may be deeply confused about where they are going. They may have no idea that they are in the right direction, but everybody is looking inside and saying they know where they are going. Unconscious and unlearnable alignment of stimulus and response. The natural. That is somebody who is naturally going along in the right direction, not because they have the talent or the skills, but simply because that is what they are meant to do. The gift of all second lines is that they do not know how to interfere with themselves. That is a blessing because it just comes out. What happens, though, is that other people jump in, and it is their interference that creates dilemmas. Others jump in and say, do you realize that you are going in the right direction? That is terrific. Those others are pumping up their ego, trying to get that second line to think, yes, it is me. The natural, Saturn exalted. The inner strength to focus and realize. Just to be in your direction, without even knowing that this is a direction, means just to be in your life. When you come to the Mars in detriment, you have genius as madness. Knowledge exclusively as power for the enhancement of the ego. This is the moment where somebody steps in and looks inside, sees the two in their direction and says, wow, you have really done it. And they say, yes, and I'll tell you how I did it. Then they really get into trouble. These are people that are always claiming that they have achieved power out of knowledge. In the White Book, A Natural Gift for Unlearnable Knowing, or The Delusion that Knowledge is Power. This is the delusion that your direction is the result of your genius, your hard work, or of you being marvelous. Paper tigers. They will get a terrible surprise. Will get us up. The driver in the lower trigram does not even know that there is a gas pedal at the other end, and therefore, you can't expect that the capacity to drive is something that necessarily happens. They are always surprised that there is a gas pedal because they do not expect it to be there. They are basically just reading maps. The first line is looking at all the various maps that are around, and the second line has a map that is just wired into its brain. It is just there, but it does not mean that they go anywhere unless they get access to energy. Nor does it mean that they know how to handle the energy when it is there. It is one thing to be a good driver, but if you don't know how to use the gas pedal, you can end up smashing into a tree simply because you are out of control or because you cannot handle the fuel. This is still lower trigram. Gate 2, line 3, patience. As you see when we discuss the gates of the G center, their lines are often very special in comparison to other lines of the same kind. This is particularly true for the 2.3, as we'll see. We know third lines represent an adaptation process. These are lines of trial and error. This is a highly exalted third line. Mutation is a matter of trial and error. This is something that we know. Mutative processes are going on all the time, and they are trial and error until the right and most successful mutation takes place, takes hold, and gains its strength. The other mutations just disappear because they were not productive. What that means is that the mutative process at its very best is exemplified through the third and the sixth lines. The third line provides in the mutative process just the right mix, trial and error to find the right mutation. So here we have patience, the teacher that never stops being a student. This is the trial and error. Everyone who carries the second gate is a teacher in life in the sense that they are always providing direction, whether they want to or not. That is what teacher means in this sense, but they can never stop being a student in life. In other words, they think that they are in the right direction and something happens, and they try something else until they finally get it. Jupiter exalted. Dedication to a lifetime of receptivity with the maturity to accept that the process never ends. Mutation is not going to stop. It is an ongoing process. We must never lose our vigilance, and we must realize that all kinds of mutative possibilities are in the world at the same time looking for supremacy. In the same way that our genetic material is constantly in competition for which genes will dominate in the global gene pool, this is an ongoing process that we are involved in. When you get to the Uranus in detriment, though, you get, for the revolutionary, patience is a vice. This is the pull of the ego again that says, oh, not another change. This direction is the right one, and I will stay with it. I can't afford to go to another one. Or it is the opposite of that, which is jumping from one thing to the next rapidly, constantly breaking the bonds. This is very destabilizing. It is important to see that those people that have the 2.3 have to be aware that for them to have many directions in life is not only natural but healthy. It is healthy for them to break the bonds of direction and try another one until you finally see what really works in that sense. In the White Book, the recognition that receptivity is a lifelong process. For these people, it is an ongoing process of seeking out the mutative way. By the way, though it is a process that never ends, it does not mean to change direction until the end. They can mature into this process and simply become those that provide others with a guide to the best and the most mutative directions in life. On the other side, higher knowing that cannot wait and demands expression. The reason that this third line learns so much is that it does not know that there is a gas pedal and gets to meet it regularly. Because it is adaptive, every time that it gets a new fuel, it experiments with a new direction. People often misunderstand what that means. You may be the driver, but the fact of the matter is that the driver alone does not control the direction. He can't. The driver cannot control the direction without the gas pedal and the fuel. An example, John is a carnivore. If he wants food, he will look for a place that has meat. Victoria is a vegetarian. If she wants to find food, she will go for a place that is vegetarian. We may both go in the same direction, meaning we need to feed ourselves, but we will actually take a different course because the fuels are different. So what happens to the third line is that it experiments with all the different fuels that it meets until it finds the fuel that works. What you have learned in terms of hexagram structure, resonance, and harmonies, you can see right away what will happen to the third line. When it meets a 14.3 or a 14.6, it will find the kind of fuel that it can really work with. But it will still have to go through the dissonances, the difficulties of matching up with fuels that do not necessarily work. It is a learning process, but this is a very mutative line. Gate 2, line 4, secretiveness. When you get to the upper trigram, things change. Obviously, you come to a transpersonal line that knows that there is something on the other side. All fourth lines are rooted in opportunism. Opportunism exists in all fourth lines and waits for the opportunity. Fourth lines are one-tracked and unidirectional. They are there to externalize. Here we have secretiveness. More than modesty, the ability to preserve harmony through discretion. It is so important for a 2.4 to externalize the very foundation. In doing that, it has to be very careful about not letting other people interfere with the direction. This is an individual gate. Individuals, particularly in highly mutative gates, are not around to be influenced by anyone else. The whole business of direction carries with it a lot of weight. If a 2.4 is driving a car and you are driving with them and you both know where you think you are going, that 2.4 is not going to tell you until they make that funny left turn that they are going on their own direction. They have another way to get there. If they tell you beforehand, you are going to interfere, which will result in a problem. Venus exalted. The higher goal transcends personal acclaim. The team player, acknowledged as the leader, but never the captain. Nobody wants a mutative person as their captain because they are unreliable, but they can be great leaders. In other words, the turning of the wheel in that direction may annoy the captain, but it may turn out to be good advice and good leadership, and the captain will go along with it. The whole thing for 2.4s is to recognize the importance of secrecy in their life. Don't let other people in on the direction. Just do your thing. After all, individuals are here to be examples. They are not here to lead. They are not here to be witnesses. They are just here to be examples. This mutative direction is all about living it out as an example. When you come to the Mars in detriment, loose lips sink ships. The unquenchable fire of the ego engenders enmity. This is the ego saying, I know that you are over there, but I will make a left turn now, okay? I want to take a different way. Everybody else gets upset, and the 2.4 says, I want to go this way, and I know this way. In the White Book, where higher knowing does not have to be expressed to be recognized, and the other side, the inability to keep silent when the opportunity arises for expression. This is what happens to the self. In the moment that the ego comes in, it creates all kinds of difficulties. It takes away the value of the possibility of spiritual recognition. Direction is something that is given to us and not something that we can claim. You might have seen all kinds of movies that showed groups of 3 or 4 boys, and one of them would be the acknowledged leader, but this one would not have a driver's license. So somebody would have to drive the car, and the one who would do this would be the 2.4. If they kept it secret, they could enjoy being in charge of everybody by driving that car, even though the leader was sitting in the car. That is the exalted side, but the moment they say, hey, we are going my way because it is my car, is the moment they get into trouble. That is the detriment. Gate 2, line 5, intelligent application. 5th lines are the way society wants to see direction. The people with the 2.5 get projected on that they are the ones that know the direction, that they are the ones that have the way. The line is called intelligent application, the strategist. It is about developing a strategy of how to deal with that projection. If people project on you that you know the way, well, what do you do with that? Do you really know the way? There are 2 sides to this. One side is the Mercury exalted, the strategist, reasoned management of resources. After all, the 2.5 is at its very best. Gas pedals are always recognizing them. Gas pedals always come up to them and say, you are the one that has the direction. Do you want my fuel? The whole thing for a 2.5 is to learn how to manage those resources because they do not have the resources themselves. That is inherent in the gate, but how it operates is dependent on the design. They are always looking for the resources from others that come to them, and they manage those resources to be able to maintain their direction. The other side, the earth in detriment, the inability to share responsibility or recognize the abilities of others. Again, you can feel the flavor of the ego coming into this. The ego has always tainted the self in this way. This whole business about the inability to share responsibility, this is an individual gate after all, which will take fuel, but that does not mean that it is also taking somebody else's telling it where to go. It will not. The 2.5, even though it gets projected on that it is the one that knows the way, the moment that it refuses to take you, it gets projected on that it does not know the way, or that the way it does know is the wrong way. This is the other side of the coin. In the White Book, higher knowing as an exclusively individual and selfish process. What happens to these detriment people is that everybody is projecting on them that they have the direction and they push everybody away because they do not want to be interfered with, and they keep their direction for themselves. You are going up into the mountains? Can I join you? No, I don't want you to tell me which way to go up the mountain. Do not dare to tell me. I am smart enough to go up into the mountains with somebody who is giving me the energy, but is not going to bug me. If I don't have it myself, I'll wait for a transit to get the fuel. The 2.5 is always projected on that they have the direction and that they should be the driver. If you have a party and a couple of people are drunk, it is the 2.5 that everybody goes over to and says, "Could you drive them home?" Others think that the 2.5s know where these people live. If you are lost on a street and you end up asking somebody for direction, the person you think is the one that can tell you the way, whether or not they really can tell you, is probably a 2.5. You have this sense of, aha, they know the way. They may or may not. If they do, you think they are wonderful and their reputation grows. If not, they run into problems. If you project on them that they know the way and they get involved with the ego in that, they also run into problems. Individuality is not here to be best. Individuals go to hell the moment they try to be best at anything. There is only individual connection of the ego that goes directly into the self in order to be worked out in that case. It is one of the things about projection and the confusion between the self and the ego always to keep in mind. These people that get projected on, it is not because they know the direction. They are the direction. If you have the second gate, you're the direction. Gate 2, line 6, fixation. Sixth lines are always different than their hexagram because they are outside of the process. Here you have a line called fixation with an overview that says unable or unwilling to see the whole picture. The first thing to recognize about this is that all sixth lines are desperate to see the whole picture. That is what a sixth line is all about. It sits on the roof and tries to get the best perspective that it possibly can to take everything in, and here is the sixth line, and we have unable, unwilling to see the whole picture. Think about what mutation is all about. We absolutely must have mutation. It is essential for our evolutionary process. Society, humanity, the totality is dependent on direction, on this mutative force, and then you have these sixth lines that do not want to mutate. Their not wanting to mutate is not of benefit to the totality. However, this is not about moral distinction. It is negative in this sense. That is why the negative is there. It is negative because it is denying mutative possibilities. Think about the 24.6, which is about the possibility of being deaf when opportunity knocks. This is very true of the 2.6. In other words, it is unable to see the whole picture, so it is not ready to mutate, and, as such, may miss the opportunity for mutation and direction in its life. These people don't seem to be going anywhere, at least, not to themselves. Mercury exalted, less negative, though the intellect becomes absorbed in constant rationalization. I put you back to the 24.6 because it is the language of it. It takes you into what that process is all about. The possibility, literally, of not taking the opportunity to mutate, because if you are the 2.6 sitting there on top of the roof, you don't really see all the different roads that could be driven because you are limited in that way. In the Saturn, in detriment, the need for security may distort awareness to its ultimate perversion, destructiveness. This line is rarely understood. It resonates deeply with the 28.6, which is also part of the individual process, blaze of glory, also a sixth line. Remember, our theme throughout this hexagram is the conflict between the exalted self and the ego in detriment. This is not about good or bad. That is simply the conflict that is inherent there. What happens in this part is that, unable to see or unwilling to see the whole picture, they get fixed, and what they get fixed on is mundane direction. They get fixed on dealing with what is on the other side, the 14, which is all about security and making money and bringing rewards into your life, because the 14 is all about resources. It is about filling up your wagon. So, what happens to the 2.6 is that they get fixed on the mundane, and in doing so, everything becomes their ego, and in that, becomes destructive of them. They don't mutate, and because of that, they go through all kinds of problems, and they suffer because it is not up to their ego in that sense. In the White Book, higher knowing that is extremely narrow in its receptivity. Even at the exalted level, chances are that you are not going to get mutation out of these forces, but, as with all sixth lines, it is possible. Like all sixth lines, there is the possibility to come down from the roof the moment there really is something that is of value, and the moment that one can see from that sixth line perspective that fulfillment can take place, whatever the circuitry dictates. Individual circuitry, the knowing, centering, and integration circuits, is enormously complex. In order for that 2.6 to decide on a direction, it has to deal with that whole circuitry. It is vast, and so it is deeply limited in that sense. However, the mutations that do come out of the 2.6 are very powerful because they are very selective mutations. They can be good for us and bad. The joke is that before the 2.1 is the 24.6. In other words, the individuality in the 24.6 leads to the 2.1, and when you get to the 2.6, this leads to the 2.123.1. Pros, itization, which is about the ability to explain yourself. That is why you have the limitation here. The limitation is this sense of, wow, it is not just a direction. It is that I have to be able to explain the direction. And this is very difficult because this is always the dilemma for the individual process, to be able to explain knowing. The 2.6 is looking out and saying, oh boy, I have to explain this because otherwise I will not get other people onto this direction, and if I can't get them onto this direction, it is not mutative and it will not work. That is why the 2.6 is rationalizing. That is why intellect is mentioned in this line. The mind is constantly trying to figure out what is a direction that I can actually explain, because that really is the key. Now let's move on to a different perspective to see how the second gates sustain or communicate the purpose of life through the crosses of incarnation, right angle, cross of the Sphinx 2, consisting of following gates, 2-1-13-7. Influential confidants who combine aesthetics with a deep resonance to humanity's material needs, maintaining continuity with the past while mutating the collective's material direction. The energy of this cross is to see and be open to the possibilities. You are here to guide us by showing us the many possible directions and ways to create a beautiful world. You point out the many possible roads we may choose to take or give suggestions for alternative routes. However, you may have difficulty explaining why to take that suggested route. Juxtaposition. Cross of the driver consisting of following gates, 2-1-49-4. People who are totally focused on their direction, on their driving principles, and determined to pull others into their wake. Even momentary interactions with them can change your direction. The energy of your cross will give you direction in your life. That direction is going to be tied to discovering the truth. Your truth, the truth of those around you, and perhaps universal truths. This energy will give you consistent direction in your life, and you will try to pull those around you forward toward that destiny of knowing the truth. Left angle cross of defiance, consisting of following gates, gates 2-1-49-4. People who always seem to defy the collective's general direction by following their own. The ability to move others away from the status quo. Whether conscious of this energy or not, you are here to step out of line and to represent the other way of doing things. Your perceived defiance may be small or great, but your goal here is to bring about variations from the norm. Most of the time, this will result in slight variances coming into acceptance. This occurs not from your action, but rather from the perception of your action by others. It is in this way that you lend your design to society, tweaking those things that are mired and need change to be better. I hope this material is helpful and supporting for the development of your human design knowledge. Please share if you enjoyed listening and subscribe if you want to be notified about any new posting of informative learning materials regarding human design. Thank you.